In the last clip, we used ideas of proportionality to look at what's going on when the block is sliding on frictionless incline is compressing a spring on the other end. The next problem I want to look at with you is similar to this. There will just be a small twist in the problem, and that twist is that now we will have friction on the inclined plane. So let's start from the beginning. A 15 centimeter long spring with a spring constant of 2000 newtons per meters is set on a frictionless horizontal surface. So all the horizontal surface is frictionless. A 750 gram block is sliding down the 37-degree incline and moves at 3 meters per second when it passes point A at a height of 1.2 meter above the bottom of the incline. So this is the block, 750 gram, and then when it passes point A in here, it's moving at a speed of 3 meters per second. The question is, what will be the maximum compression of the spring? So this problem, the first thing is you have to figure out how to approach it. And probably the best idea is always to start by trying to plan how you should approach this. The fact in here that we have a spring is a very good indication that forces is not the best way to go. So we will use work, but even better, conservation of energy is the way that I want to take in here. When we use conservation of energy, what we want to do is to compare what's going on at different moment or different position. So point A is already defined. It's the moment when the block passes point A. What I'll define as being point B will be just the moment or the location when the spring is at max compression. It is at max compression. So that will be, if you want, my final stage, my second stage. So point B will be somewhere in here when the block is actually pushing against the spring, and the spring is actually now a bit shorter. So just as in the previous problem, we want to use these energy bar charts to help us think about what's going on. So these are just a reminder of all the different types of energy that you might have to deal with. So in here, as the block passes at point A, we know that it has some speed, so we know that there will be some kinetic energy. But also, if we assume that we decide that the height will be equal to 0 at the bottom of the incline, then there will also be some potential energy due to gravity. All right, I don't know the relative size of these two, but so I'm just making this up. But what I do know is that the spring is not stretched nor compressed at the beginning, so this will just be 0. And then we have to think about what's going on in terms of the work done by external forces. This, in our case, is really as an origin, the friction force. So this is where the friction will come in. So this is the work done by external forces while the block is traveling from point A to point B. So we know that this will be important, and as friction will be doing negative work, we know that this one will actually be pointing downward, so there will be a negative work due to this. On the other side, at the end, when we get to the max compression of the spring, we know that the block is stopped because it's about to change direction. We know that there is no more potential energy due to gravity due to our choice of h equals to 0. So all the energy that is left will be in the form of the potential energy of the spring. So in the end, we get an equation that we can rewrite here for the conservation of energy, which is not very surprising. We have that the mechanical energy at A plus the work done by external forces, in here friction, between point A and B will be equal to the mechanical energy once we are at point B. And the contribution, as we discussed above, are just kinetic energy at A plus potential energy due to gravity at A, plus the work done by the friction force going from A to B, and all of this will be equal to the potential energy of the spring when we reach point B. Our unknown in here is really the energy stored in the spring. The other three quantities we can actually figure out. So let's start with the easier one. So we know that the kinetic energy at A is just equal to 1/2 times the mass times the velocity when the block is at A squared. So if we plug numbers in there, we get 1/2 times the mass, which is 0.750 kilograms, times the velocity, which was given as 3 meters per second, all of that being squared. And what we get is that the kinetic energy of the block as it passes point A will be equal to 3.375, and the units that we get, kilograms meters squared over second square, that's just a joule. We can do the same thing for the potential energy due to gravity at point A, which will just be equal again to the mass times the acceleration due to gravity times the height at point A. So again, same mass as before, 0.750 kilograms times the acceleration due to gravity, which is 9.80 meters per second square. And finally, the height of A was already given in the question to be 1.20 meters. So we know that we have to multiply this by 1.20 meters. And once you do the math, you will get 8.82. And the units again, kilogram meter squared over second square. So we know we're dealing with joules once more. So indeed, my diagram in here wasn't that bad. The kinetic energy is indeed smaller than the potential energy due to gravity. Finally, the other piece that we want to use will eventually need to have the energy stored in the spring at the end, and this will just be 1/2 K times the compression of the spring at point B squared. And I want you to notice that this K is not a capital K, it's not the kinetic energy, it's really the spring constant, so 2000 newtons per meters. But since we don't know the XB yet, this is actually an unknown quantity. And the next thing that we want, or the last piece that is missing, is really the work done by friction while the block is traveling from A to B. And this we can actually figure out, but it's a little bit more complicated, so let me just change slide before we do so. So the work done by friction when it's going from A to B actually is just for the part while the block is moving down the incline, because afterwards we know it's frictionless. So what we'll have to use is the friction force while the block is on the incline times the distance traveled on the incline. So from A to, let's say, point C, that will be just a point that is in here at the bottom of the incline, times the cosine of the angle between these two quantities. Okay, so this angle is not the same as the angle of the inclined plane, so let me call it alpha, just another value for the angle. It's important to understand that when we're dealing with these, what we have is really two vectors. So if we imagine that the block is in here, we have the displacement of the block while it's going down the incline that will be pointing this way. So this is a displacement between A and C. And we know that the friction force will be pointing in the opposite direction against the motion. So the angle alpha that we need is really the angle between these two vectors in here. So that's really alpha. So in here we can see that because friction is going against the direction of motion, we'll have an angle of 180 degrees. So when we plug this back in the cosine in here, this will just give us a value of -1, which tells us that the work done by the friction force is indeed negative. So this means that the friction is taking energy away from the system. It's trying to slow down the block. Again, not surprising. We also need, however, to figure out what will be the value of D and what will be the value of Fk. Let's start with D because it's a little bit easier. If we know that we have our incline, and the incline is such that the height of the block at the beginning is equal to 1.2 meters, and what we're looking for, the value of D, is just the part that is the hypotenuse of this triangle. And we know that the angle for the incline is of 37 degrees. This means that by using SOHCAHTOA, you can figure out easily that the value, the 1.20 meters, is actually equal to the length DAC multiplied by the sine of 37 degrees. So this means that the DAC will be equal to 1.20 meters divided by the sine of 37 degrees, which once we calculate will give us 1.99 meters. The other piece that we have to figure out is the force due to friction. And we know that when we deal with kinetic friction, the force due to friction is just equal to mu k times the normal force. Mu k we know, it's 0.25, that's easy. However, to figure out the normal, there is no easy way here. We really have to rely on sum of forces and Newton's laws. So if I just redraw something you're really used to see, if we say that this is my y-axis and this is my x-axis, we need to figure out what's the normal, the forces that are applied on the block as it's falling or sliding down, I should say, will be your force due to gravity. And there's also the force of friction that is pointing against the motion. And finally, we have the normal force that is pointing up the incline. So something that you're now familiar with, we need to think of Fg and figure out what's the value of Fg that is on the y-axis. So the angle that we have in here is actually the 37-degree angle that we have for the incline. So this means that as Fgy is adjacent to this angle, we know that the normal force will just be equal to Fg times the cosine of 37 degrees. So we can put this back in the equation that we have there, and in the end we'll get that Fk is equal to mu k times Fg, which I will just replace by m times the acceleration due to gravity times the cosine of 37 degrees. If we plug the numbers back in, we figure out that this will just be 0.25 times m, which is 0.750 kilograms, times the value of g, 9.80 meters per second square, times the cosine of 37 degree, which gives us about 0.8. And when we put all these numbers together, we get something in newtons, not surprisingly, and we get 1.47 newtons. Finally, last step, we want to find the work done by friction. So we have the work done by friction between point A and B will be equal to the force due to friction times the distance between A and B, which actually is the distance between A and C, because friction, because the horizontal surface is frictionless, times the cosine of alpha. So when we put all of this together, we get 1.47 newtons times 1.99 meters times the cosine of 180 degrees, as we discussed. So in the end, once we get all of this, we get 2.92 Newton times meters, that's joules, that's good, and the cosine of 180 gives us this extra negative sign in the calculation. With this information, we can now go back to our previous slides, so we know now that the work done by the friction force will be equal to minus 2.92 joules, and by combining all of that information together, we can figure out the value of the energy stored in the spring at the end when it's at max compression. So we have, as we said, Ka plus UGA plus the work done by the friction force between A and B. And by plugging the values that we just found in there, we get 3.375 joules plus 8.82 joules plus the work done by friction. But remember that that work is itself a negative value. We know that it's taking energy out of the system. So what we get is a total energy stored in the spring of 9.275 joules. So that's the amount of energy that we have stored in the spring. We have only one piece left to do, which is to replace this in the equation to solve for the compression of the spring. So finally, knowing that USB is equal to 9.275 joules, and we have the expression for the energy stored in the spring, we can isolate XP. So we get that the maximum compression of the spring will be equal to twice the potential energy stored in the spring divided by the spring constant. And all of this, we need to take the square root. So replacing the values in there, we get the square root of 2 times 9.275 joules all of that divided by the spring constant, which is of 2000 newtons per meters. So you can see that unit-wise we have joules divided by newtons times meters. Joules divided by newtons, that will be meters. We'll bring the second meter to the top, to the numerator. Taking the square root, we indeed get a length that will be in meters. And if we do the math in here, we'll just get a numerical value of 0.0963. So this is the compression of the spring. Since it's compression, we usually write it as a negative sign, just to remind us that the spring is getting shorter. So our final answer is that the maximum compression of the spring is minus 0.0963 meters. So about almost 10 centimeters, which makes sense in here.